starting radical action, it says, 20th of September 2009. And this is by Suzanne Goldenberg, who's finding herself a cushy job as an environment correspondent. They all have environmental correspondents now with little green logos, eh? Just before I read the article, I'll mention how things go in business for greening. Staples is where I sometimes go for stationery and stuff. And they had this massive sign up there saying that we're going green. Staples is going green. And I thought, well, what do you mean you're going green? Well, I found out because the little discs that you get, the little covers you put on the disc, the paper discs, little paper ones you put on your CD and disc, etc., have been changed to half their thickness. They're like tissue paper, the same price. That's what they mean by going green. You know, massive profits all around for them, and a real hassle for you as you try to stick these things on with a print onto a CD. That's what they mean by going. Everything about it is a big con. Everything. And it says the United Nations is planning a form of diplomatic shock therapy for world leaders this week in hope of injecting badly needed urgency into negotiations for a climate change treaty. It needs to be global warming, but that kind of failed, so it's just changes in the weather. It says it is now widely acknowledged are dangerously adrift. The treaty is dangerously adrift. Oh, danger, danger. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon, where did they get these guys? And negotiators say that unless they can convert world leaders into committed advocates of radical action, and you better believe they mean this, radical action means we are going to get forced through radical action. It will be very hard to reach a credible and enforceable, right, agreement to avoid the most devastating consequences of climate change, changes in the weather. As a digital counter ticking off the hours to the Copenhagen summit, which has been supposed to seal the deal on climate change, hits 77 days today. Progress at the UN summit in New York is seen as vital. I wish they'd simply give it its own island and float it off somewhere, that UN in New York there. Quite the history. Go into who gave them the land and what the land was used for before they built the towers there for the UN buildings. Talk about the occult. It's all there. It says here, nearly 100 heads of state and government are to attend the summit, for which a pared-down format has been devised. I guess that's in simple speak. We need these leaders to go outside their usual comfort zone, said one diplomat. We don't even get their names. Our sense is that leaders have got a little too cozy and comfortable. They really have to hear from countries that are vulnerable and suffering. Then he goes on and on and on. It mentions Al Gore that shared the Peace Prize with Rajendra Pachauri, head of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are the guys who have been given the duty of enforcing the idea that the Club of Rome came up with to control the world, under saving the environment and the world. We're going to take all your rights away and tell you how to live and breed and what to eat and all the rest of it. That's what it's all about. Quite something. Commenting on the leaders attending the G20 summit in Pittsburgh next week, see how they all time things to come together at the same time. He said, we need to remind these people about impacts of weather changes. Some days it's raining, sometimes it's sunny. I added the last bit. The fact that they're inequitable and fall very heavily on some of the poorest people in the world. We are likely to see a large number of failed states if we don't act in time, they say. Now, the IMF, as I say, was never set up to help the poor. They've devastated most of the countries. South Africa went through into democracy and out the other side, just like that, when they found out it didn't exist. And that the big international corporations had the same deals going with the same boys at the top. And they're as poor as ever. The International Monetary Fund that gives out these massive loans and forces them into what they call chemical farming, when they must buy all the chemicals to keep the soil going and grow the veggies. And before you know it, they cannot pay it all back because of the massive interest rates. Then in comes the IMF and runs their country for them. That's how it works. That's how it works. You know, when Maggie Thatcher was in, it was declared after she was out of government that most of the time the IMF had been running Britain because it owed so much money and couldn't pay off its debt. They're the heavy boys. You send in the heavies, you see, on behalf of the bankers. And every country's agreed that you must do what IMF says. But this is, again, here's your shock and awe, your typical shock and awe, and you're going to get awful, terrifying scenarios pushed at you until we go through this Copenhagen Agreement again and ratify the radical changes that they have to put through to make sure that we all follow. Because we're all going to get taxed individually for the carbon outputs that it takes for everything that you buy. Do you know how much it costs to make that donut? Do you know how much that cost, how much energy went into making that donut? And you're going to pay for that donut. If you think there's a hole in the donut, that's going to be a hole in your wallet. Believe you me, this is the most incredible form of slavery. I always think of slavery because one of their boys, you see, was, apart from the whole Darwin line, was Charles Galton Darwin. In the 1950s, he wrote a book called The Next Million Years, outlining the whole eugenics plan for the whole world and the drastic depopulation plan they'd have to enforce somehow, either through putting stuff in their food to kill them off, injecting them with it, or putting it in their water even, making them sterile. And he talked on behalf of all the elite, you see, who already ruled the world. And he said in this book, there has always existed slavery in one form or another. We're simply creating a new, more sophisticated form of slavery. Well, guess what? You're seeing it being implemented right now. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and we're cutting through the matrix. Now whenever you see all the media in different countries get on board with the same propaganda, and that's what it is propaganda, you see, then you know it's all coordinated. All coordinated. And even some of the ones that seem to come out on behalf of the people and shoot up there, then end up doing this strange curve, you know, and coming around as well. Here's Breitbart, who said a lot of good stuff in the past. And here he is, basically just putting out a UN propaganda release. And this is from September the 21st. Unchecked population growth is speeding climate change, damaging life-nurturing ecosystems, and dooming many countries to poverty, Experts concluded in a conference report released Monday. Remember what Lord Bertrand Russell said, we'll train the public to listen to experts. You don't even need names now, just experts say. It's all been done. We've lived through it. It's been done. Unless birth rates are lowered sharply through voluntary family planning programs and easy access to contraceptives, the tally of humans on Earth could swell, and then it could not, right? It could swell to an unsustainable 11 billion by 2050. They warned. You're the unknown they. The UN currently, the United Nations again, you see, currently projects that global populations will rise from 6.8 billion today to between 8 and 10.5 billion by mid-century. It could, you see, or it will. But where's their data for it? The researchers said that with 1.5 million more humans climbing aboard the planet every week, our recipe is looming for ecological overload, famine, and broken states. Now, remember that last article I read, the first article, how they give you shock and awe, and they admit it after the conferences, that they grossly exaggerate everything to terrify the public in going along. So this is what all this stuff is. Then this goes on and on. This particular article here mentions different characters involved in this present UN hype. And it says, continued rapid population growth in many of the least developed countries could lead to hunger, failure of education, and conflict, said Malcolm Potts at the University of California in Berkeley, which hosted the conference in February. The paper is authored by 42 specialists in environmental science, economics, and demography, are published by, and here you go, the Royal Society, Britain's de facto Academy of Sciences. See, anybody who's made it to the top in science at all, been pushed up there, has to be a member of the Royal Society. Interesting history, I say, occultic history. Francis Bacon joins it. Others joined. You had to, if you were married, you couldn't be married. You had to put away your wife and family, disassociate yourself to become a brother. It was a Masonic organization, you see. They guide the world. After all, if you only have progress,